My name is Andrew. I'm not someone who's ever really believed in the supernatural or the unknown. I've always preferred logic, reason, and cold, hard facts. Growing up, I often found myself at odds with the more emotional or mystical aspects of life. Everything has an explanation, a cause, a reason. This was my truth. But everything changed the day I met Evelyn. It started like any other ordinary day. I just moved into a new apartment, eager to start fresh in the city. I was a young professional, not particularly looking for anything or anyone, just settling into the rhythm of my life. I was doing fine, or so I thought. I met her at a bar, of all places. I wasn't really interested in meeting anyone, but Evelyn was different. At least, that's what I thought at first. She had a magnetic presence, like she was the center of the universe. Tall, with long dark hair that shimmered like it had been spun from midnight. Her eyes were pale, unsettlingly so, like they could pierce right through you. She wore a tight black dress, simple but strong. Watching a movie. I glanced at my phone, only to find a series of texts from her, sent minutes before I'd even checked the time. "Where are you?" she'd written. "I can't wait to see you." I hadn't told her I was home. I hadn't texted her, not that day. Yet there she was, already anticipating my every move. "You're home earlier than I thought," she remarked, her tone smooth, but there was something in her voice that didn't sit right. "I thought you'd be out longer." I stared at her, my unease growing. "How did you know I was out?" She shrugged, unfazed. "I always know where you are." I forced a smile, trying to shake off the discomfort building in my chest. "That's a little unsettling, don't you think?" Evelyn simply laughed, a soft, melodic sound that only added to my confusion. "I don't mean to creep you out," she said, resting a hand on my leg, her fingers cold against my skin. "I just care about you, Andrew. I care about you a lot." I didn't know how to respond. I tried to push away the growing feeling that something was wrong, but it lingered. It festered. The more time I spent with her, the more I saw these strange behaviors. The way she would watch me, intensely, when I wasn't looking. The way she would always find a way to slip into my life, no matter where I went or what I did. It started to feel like she was watching, waiting for me to make a mistake, to slip up. But I still couldn't stop myself from being with her. There was something magnetic about her, something that made it impossible to walk away. Then came the first real moment that made me question everything. One night, after a late dinner, we ended up back at my apartment. I had been drinking, just enough to feel buzzed but not enough to forget my surroundings. Evelyn, however, seemed different. There was an intensity in her eyes I hadn't seen before, an unnerving calmness that sent a chill down my spine. She stood up suddenly, pacing around my living room, her eyes darting between the furniture, her lips pressed together in a thin line. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice uncertain. She turned, her face suddenly twisted into something almost unrecognizable. There was a moment of silence, a heavy pause, before she spoke again, her voice colder, sharper. "I can't keep pretending anymore, Andrew." "Pretending?" I asked, standing from the couch, my stomach tightening. "What do you mean?" Her eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw something truly terrifying in them. Something dark, something primal. "I've been watching you. Studying you. It's almost time, Andrew." I froze. "What do you mean by time?" She stepped closer, her movement fluid, like a predator closing in on its prey. "You don't get it, do you? I've been waiting for you to understand. To see me for who I really am." "Evelyn, this isn't funny. What the hell are you talking about?" She didn't answer at first. Instead, she reached for her purse, pulling something from it, a small, gleaming knife. My breath caught in my throat. I took a step back, not knowing if this was some twisted joke or something far worse. "You're afraid, aren't you, Andrew?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You should be." The knife gleamed in the dim light, the cold steel reflecting the glow of the overhead lamp. It was then that I realized something truly horrifying. Evelyn wasn't just interested in me. She didn't care about me the way I thought she did. She was obsessed with me. She was obsessed with control. "I don't understand," I said, my voice shaking as I backed away toward the door. "Why are you doing this?" She smiled. It wasn't a comforting smile, but one that showed something far more sinister. "You'll understand soon enough," she said. "But you need to stop running. You need to stop pretending." I didn't wait another second. I bolted for the door, my heart hammering in my chest. I don't remember how I got out, how I ended up on the street, but I do remember the feeling, the overwhelming sense that something was terribly, horribly wrong. The next few days were a blur of confusion and fear. I changed my phone number, avoided any places she could have known about, even took a different route to work. I did everything I could think of to escape her reach. But no matter where I went, no matter what I did, Evelyn always seemed to be there. Her presence grew more suffocating. She left notes at my apartment. She sent letters, even showed up at my workplace once, waiting outside the building with that same unsettling smile. I tried to ignore her, tried to act like everything was normal, but inside, I was falling apart. One evening, I found myself at a bar, drowning my fears in alcohol, trying to forget. I'd almost convinced myself I was safe, that maybe she'd finally given up. But when I looked up from my drink, there she was. Evelyn. She stood across the bar, watching me, her pale eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold. My heart stopped. I didn't move. I couldn't. She started to walk toward me, each step slow, deliberate. She was smiling, but it wasn't the same smile I had seen before. This one was predatory, almost cruel. It was as if she was savoring the moment, savoring my fear. "I told you, Andrew," she whispered when she reached me, her voice a low, cold breath against my ear. "You belong to me now. You always will." And in that moment, I realized I had been right all along. I wasn't just her obsession, I was her prize. And no matter how far I ran, no matter how hard I tried to escape, would never be free of her. I still see her sometimes. In the reflection of windows, in the crowd, in my dreams. Always watching. Always waiting. And I know now that Evelyn will never let me go. My name is Nathan. I'd like to think I'm a rational person, always thinking things through, skeptical of the unknown, and rarely shaken by the unusual. But sometimes, even the most logical of people can be blind to the darkness that lurks just out of sight. It was an ordinary Tuesday when everything changed, though at the time, I didn't realize it. I had just moved into a new neighborhood, a quiet, suburban area. It was the kind of place where people kept to themselves but were friendly enough in passing. My apartment was on the second floor of a modest building, a little cramped, but it had a certain charm. I liked it, and I was eager to settle in and start my new life. The first few days were uneventful. I spent most of my time unpacking, arranging furniture, and catching up on some overdue reading. I had no immediate plans to make any new friends. After all, I'd just gotten out of a long, exhausting relationship, and the idea of being around anyone other than myself was far from appealing. I was content to exist in my little bubble, away from the world. But then I met him. It was on a rainy evening, around 7 p.m. I just returned home from grabbing a bite to eat, my mind preoccupied with the mundane tasks of my day. As I was unlocking the door to my apartment, I noticed a figure standing near the stairwell, tall, gaunt, dressed in a long, dark coat despite the rain. His face was hidden in the shadows, but something about him gave me pause. There was a chill in the air, one that seemed to emanate from him rather than the weather. I hesitated for a moment, my hand still gripping the doorknob. "Hey there," he called out, his voice gravelly but not unfriendly. "You're Nathan, right?" I nodded, slightly taken aback that he knew my name. He stepped into the dim light of the hallway, revealing a pale face with sharp features, almost unnaturally sharp. His eyes were dark, almost too dark, and they seemed to gleam with an unsettling intensity. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I'm Adam. I live a couple of floors down," he continued, his gaze never leaving mine. "I've seen you around a few times. Thought I'd introduce myself." I wasn't sure what to make of him. There was something off about the way he looked at me, like he was sizing me up, as though I were a puzzle to be solved. I forced a polite smile, trying to dismiss the unease gnawing at the back of my mind. "Well, it's nice to meet you, Adam," I said, shifting slightly, hoping he would take the hint and let me get inside. "I've just moved in, so I'm still getting settled." His smile widened, but it still didn't seem genuine. "I understand. Moving is always a hassle. I can help with anything if you need it. I'm usually around." His voice was smooth, too smooth, like he was rehearsing the words. I nodded again, not sure how to respond. I didn't need help, but I didn't want to be rude. "Thanks, I'll keep that in mind," I said, trying to edge towards the door. But before I could slip inside, he took a step closer, blocking my way. His expression shifted, and for a brief moment, I saw something else in his eyes, something dark, something dangerous. "You should be careful around here, Nathan," he said softly, his tone changing. "Not everyone is as friendly as they seem. Some people have a way of getting under your skin. You should watch your back." I felt a shiver run down my spine. His words didn't make any sense, and yet, they left an uncomfortable weight in the air. "I'll keep that in mind," I replied, forcing myself to sound calm, though my heart was starting to race. "Thanks for the warning, Adam." With that, I quickly stepped inside and closed the door behind me, locking it for good measure. My pulse was still racing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had just gone terribly wrong. I tried to brush it off. People are strange, I thought. Maybe Adam was just eccentric or socially awkward. There's always one oddball in every neighborhood. And as much as I wanted to believe that, I couldn't ignore the way his eyes had flickered, the way his words had felt like a warning, no, an invitation, to something darker. Over the next few days, I did my best to avoid Adam. I hadn't seen him in the hallway again, and I didn't make any effort to go looking for him. I was determined not to let his strange behavior affect me. But no matter how hard I tried to push it out of my mind, I found myself glancing over my shoulder whenever I walked through the building. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was always watching, lurking just out of sight. It was on the fourth day after our initial encounter that things took a turn. I was coming home from work, exhausted and ready to collapse into my couch for a quiet evening, when I noticed something strange. The hallway lights were flickering. Normally, the lights were dim, but today, they were almost completely out. I frowned, trying to remember when the last time the maintenance crew had fixed them was. It was strange, but not alarming. Maybe a bulb had gone out, I thought. As I walked down the hallway, a figure stepped out from the shadows, Adam. This time, he was standing near the staircase, his back against the wall. His head tilted slightly as if he were waiting for me. The same unsettling smile stretched across his face when he saw me approach. "Hello again, Nathan," he greeted, his voice smooth but almost too calm. "I was hoping I'd run into you." I felt a knot form in my stomach. There was something in the air, something that felt off, more so than the first time. "Hey, Adam," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Is everything okay? The lights are out in the hall." "Oh, they're fine," he replied. "I've been doing a little thinking, Nathan. About you." I froze. About me? He nodded, his smile never faltering. Yes. About your habits. Your life. The way you move through the world. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. You're an interesting man, Nathan. You hide things well. But I can see through it. I took a step back, the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. What do you mean by that? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Oh, you know, he said with a wave of his hand. The little things. Your patterns. The way you think you're hiding from me, when in reality, I see everything. You think you're alone, but you're not. I'm always watching. Panic began to rise in my chest. This wasn't a normal conversation. This wasn't a friendly neighbor trying to be nice. This was something far darker, far more dangerous. I could feel it now, deep in my bones. What do you want from me? I asked, my voice shaking. Adam took another step forward, his face mere inches from mine. His eyes, those dark, unsettling eyes, bore into me with a cold intensity that made me want to run. I want to understand you, Nathan, he whispered, his breath cold against my skin. I want to know what makes you tick. What keeps you up at night? What makes you afraid? I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself, but my pulse was racing. I wanted to shove him away, to tell him to leave me alone, but I couldn't move. I was frozen, locked in place by something I couldn't explain. And then, as if sensing my growing fear, Adam smiled again. But this time, it wasn't a friendly smile. It wasn't a smile that invited conversation. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated malice. I can see it in your eyes, Nathan, he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous murmur. You're afraid of me. You should be. In that moment, I snapped out of my trance. I turned on my heel and ran, my heart pounding in my chest. I heard his laughter echoing behind me, cold and distant, as I barreled down the hallway and into my apartment. I slammed the door shut, locking it again, but the sound of his laughter still lingered in my ears. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I kept seeing his face, hearing his voice, his words repeating over and over in my mind. I see everything. I'm always watching. For the next few days, I did everything I could to avoid him. I left for work early, stayed late, took the stairs instead of the elevator, anything to avoid running into him. But no matter what I did, I always felt his presence, like he was just around the corner, waiting for me to slip. I finally decided I had to leave the apartment, leave the city, leave everything. It was the only way I could escape him. But as I packed my things, I found something under my bed, a note, scrawled hastily in black ink. It read, I'm never far away, Nathan. You can run, but I will always find you. And that's when I realized, I was never truly alone.
As the final echoes of the tale fade into the darkness, remember this, in the shadows where fear takes root, the true horror lies not in the creatures that lurk, but in the darkness within ourselves. We tell these stories not just to scare or entertain, but to confront the fears that we try so hard to ignore. So as you step back into the light of the real world, carry with you the lessons of the night. The monsters we create are reflections of our deepest anxieties, and the strength to overcome them is within each of us. Sleep well, and remember, in the realm of fear, we are the true masters of our fate. Good night, and may your dreams be free of shadows. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and click the notification bell for you to see my future update on this channel. Stay safe and always remember to lock your doors.